Good evening. You're back with the Mojo story. Our focus continues to be on the Pegasus leaks. Every day, this expose by 16 different media organizations around the world is throwing up new names. Will the Modi government order an investigation like France has done earlier today? Let's look at some of the new names that we have information on. Like we said, these names of targets of possible surveillance continue to tumble out. The latest is G. Parmeshwara. There are questions now arising about Karnataka politics as his name gets added to the list of possible targets for snooping and the hacking of phones. Personal secretaries of H.D. Kumaraswamy and former Chief Minister Siddaramaiah are also making their way to this list, raising questions about whether Karnataka's politics, and we have seen the up and down there, we saw the Kumaraswamy government fall, also had something to do with the Pegasus leaks. Those accused in the Bhima Koregaon case, activist Sudha Bhardwaj among them, have also been listed as targets of possible surveillance. Questions are being raised about whether evidence could have been planted on their devices. The government has continued to say that all of these allegations of unauthorized surveillance is false. The irony of the IT minister, whose own name was on the list before he was IT minister, not escaping anybody. France, as we said, has ordered a probe, in particular, into the use of Pegasus to spy on journalists, right? So this is the big story at this moment. Amit Shah has, of course, rubbished these allegations, saying that it is an attempt to malign India. But can the government continue to disassociate itself from this controversy? If the government says it has not indulged in any unauthorized surveillance, is it saying that those in these lists were authorized to be put under surveillance? And if it wasn't the government, then who? Why would the government not order a probe like other countries have done? Let's introduce our guests on the program today, if we can bring them up. सबसे पहले मैं स्वागत करना चाहूंगी रुपेश कुमार सिंह का। रुपेश कुमार सिंह पत्रकार हैं और भारत की 39 पत्रकारों में से हैं among 40 who found themselves listed as possible targets, while those of us in the big cities have access to making a lot of noise. What's happening to journalists who are in smaller cities? What's the kind of vulnerability they're facing today? ये हम रुपेश से समझेंगे. Dr. Sanjay Baru, veteran journalist, editor, author, who has been advisor to Dr. Manmohan Singh, is with us on the program as well. Saba Naqvi is on the program with us, with another senior journalist. Smita Prakash is with us. Smita Prakash, of course, is a very senior journalist and the editor of A9 News Agency. And Rajat Sethi, who is a commentator as well as a political analyst and has been an advisor to the Manipur Chief Minister, is with us as well. Dr. Baru, I'll start with you, because you're someone who's worn two hats in this. You have been and continue to be a senior journalist, and you have been inside government. So you know a thing or two about surveillance. History also tells us that governments like that of Rajiv Gandhi fell at one point when they found themselves implicated in a snooping scandal. Today we're a lot more jaded. Technology also raises all kinds of other questions. What is your reaction to what we know thus far, Sanjay?
Well, I think my reaction would be the same as the reaction of any citizen in the country, that this is utterly shocking. Whatever we have seen till now suggests that this kind of surveillance cannot be done without the approval of a government. Whether that government is the Indian government or some other government is the question that many people have raised. If it is indeed the Indian government that has authorized the surveillance, then it raises serious questions at home. But if it is not the Indian government, then some other extra foreign government has ordered, then it's even more serious. So either way, it's a serious issue, and any surveillance is a serious issue. It's not as if this is the first time that surveillance is being done of people in public life. But certainly, when something gets exposed, it requires adequate, inquiry. The opposition political parties have demanded that inquiry, and I think the time has come for the government to accept that there is a need for inquiry. I don't think we can simply say that no, we have nothing to do with this. Either way, whether it's whether the government at home is at fault or some government outside is at fault, the kind of information that has been put out by the Wire website deserves a serious inquiry. And I think all of us should in fact demand such an inquiry.
Dr. Baru, one of the things that the government has said in a statement that's somewhat ambiguous, and they said the same thing in 2019 when Pegasus first gave to the headlines, is that there has been no unauthorized surveillance. But they're not answering the key question, which is whether the government was a client of Pegasus or not. They might argue that they're not obliged to answer that in the public domain because, they could cite national security, they could cite anything they want to at this point and wash their hands off it.
No, I think the issue of national security would have been acceptable if the targets of such surveillance were terrorists or people who have actually harmed national interest. But when the targets are political leaders, are journalists, are civil liberties activists, then in fact, it's a breach of our privacy. It's a breach of individual freedom, and therefore I don't think that argument holds. I think we need a thorough investigation, even if the government does not authorize this. It must institute a public inquiry and come clean with the facts, because it is serious. What has been exposed is serious. As I said, this may not be the first time this is happening, but certainly every time something like this gets exposed, it is serious. I mean, I keep telling people it's like when you cross a red light when you're driving a car, and then you say, oh, but so many others are doing it. But if you get caught, then you have to answer. You have to pay the fine. So it's not about whether it's been done before or whether others do it. It's about getting caught. And certainly this time the expose puts the government in a bad light. And therefore, I think we need a proper inquiry. And it might clear the government. I'm not suggesting that it may not clear the government. But certainly an inquiry is called for.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Smita, despite the fact that there's so many journalists who are at the center of this story, we have seen the government and the Home Minister in particular using his now famous, or some would say infamous line, "Aap chronology samjha kare." He's basically saying this is an attempt to malign India and it's all rubbish, and and that's its singular aim. To which global media organizations have responded by saying, "Do you really think that we would time this story to the opening of the Indian Parliament? There are too many media organizations involved in this for that to be an effective rebuttal." Smita, Prakash, and can we unmute her, please? Smita, you're on mute. You're unmuted your end. Can you just unmute yourself at your end?
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead. Thank you, Barkha, for having me on your show. It's the first time I'm coming on your show. One point which, when you were mentioning in your opening, which was that the Rajiv Gandhi government fell. The thing is that the Rajiv Gandhi government didn't fall. It was the Chandrasekhar government which fell because.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I meant the Rajiv Gandhi Chandrasekhar face-off over snooping. Yes.
Yeah, he's the one who pulled down the government over snooping. Of course, in those days, there were no cell phones. So the only way to snoop was either through the landlines being tapped or else physically snooping. So in his case, it was he accused the Chandrasekhar government of placing people in front of his house, policemen, Delhi policemen, for snooping. So yeah, so snooping is something which has happened for a long, long time. Now, about whether this snooping and this new revelations which have just come today about Karnataka politicians, whether in 2019 their phones were selected. I mean, the words that have been used are that they were potential targeting of those phones, right? None of those people have given their phones. They have not been forensically checked. The Wire story says that that they were not checked because none of them submitted it. Forensic was not available. So, there's a lot which is like may have happened, could have happened, these kind of things which are there. I agree with what Dr. Baru said, that I think the government should have an investigation done. I don't have much hope, frankly, of anything coming out of it. I mean, I may sound cynical, but of all the years that I have seen, nothing ever comes out of this snooping scandal. None of the allegations so far, because what do you have to do to come to the bottom of it? You have to submit your phone. So even the earlier thing which happened, nobody submitted their phones. They said, oh, purana phone tha, reh gaya, wahan pe, idhar reh gaya, wahan reh gaya. Because do you really want to submit your phone to Delhi police or Bangalore police or anybody? Because once you submit it, all your call data is now available. So whether you were snooped or not, willy-nilly, you now will get all your details
Yeah,
have come in.
yeah.
Your records called in, everything will come in. Your conversations, where you were, your roaming details will all be out. So nobody does it. So it never comes out. So I really don't have hopes. In fact, the government has, they apne pair pe kulhadi mari hai. They can easily say, yes, we'll have a survey, we'll do
But
a
submit your devices.
give your
But submit
devices.
your devices.
Nobody
Yeah.
will give their devices.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. And Saba, I can personally share that there's a police complaint when I was getting threats on my phone, and I filed an FIR. But when the Delhi police asked me to submit my device, I actually declined for the same reasons as Smita said. That I felt that my privacy, my who I talk to, all of that would be in the domain of the police. And I think that we've seen that in many of the people who've been listed as possible targets, whether it's the woman staffer who complained against Justice Gogoi, whether it's Rahul Gandhi. The devices have not been provided for forensic evidence, and I'm not judging that. I'm saying there are very good reasons to not provide these devices. But then, isn't Smita right, and maybe we're all just cynical and jaded, that we're never actually going to be able to uncover the truth of this? And that's why the
So,
government can brazen it out.
so I think Barkha, I mean, there is certainly a point here, but that's at the later stage. Right now, we have the mother of all scandals, where it seems we can all be violated, where it seems that leaders of the opposition can be violated, ordinary journalists can be violated, and this is our basic contract as citizens to maintain our privacy has gone. So the fundamental question is not the little inconvenience about those who will or will not submit their phone, is who ordered this violation of privacy which goes against all fundamental rights, the contract that we all have with our government. Who ordered it? What can it achieve? Can it input data into other people's? As it is, it appears that many people, we can all, ordinary journalists, beat journalists, have been violated. Some of them have submitted their phone for forensic examination. But forget that. Leaders of the opposition have been violated. It's very, very serious. I don't think we can look away at the inconvenience of handing over a few devices by individuals as a thing, oh, kuch nahi hoga, aise hota rehta hai. Out of all the tapping scandals that have come out, this is the biggest and the most serious, because we all carry data, we all have cell phones, all our lives can be intruded upon. And are we ready to submit to living in a sort of surveillance state? This, if we are standing at that tip with the Pegasus probe, we are standing at that point. We have to ask
Okay.
ourselves that. So nothing less than a complete impartial judicial inquiry at the highest level, joint parliamentary inquiries, all of that, for us to recover that bit of democratic rights which are lost when these kind
Okay.
of things become public. That's what I would say.
Okay. I do want to hear from Rupesh in a moment from now in his own words about what he feels is a journalist on that list. But Rajat, do you think that, given the fact that the government has not answered one question, central question, did it use and purchase Pegasus? They've not answered that directly, neither now nor in 2019. That therefore the disassociation is not working. To suggest that this is a conspiracy timed to the start of Parliament is actually ridiculous. Ravi Shankar Prasad saying it's revenge for India's management of COVID is perhaps the most ridiculous response. Surely there can be more mature responses, and if the government really wanted everybody off their back, appoint a Supreme Court monitored probe.
Well, Barkha, my central point here is that today, people who are in opposition will tomorrow be in power. Today, who are in power will might as well be in opposition. Therefore, the essential sine qua non for a working functional democracy remains the right to privacy. There can be no doubts about it, and anybody, I mean, there should be a collective kind of an agreement among various stakeholders to come out and get to the bottom of this. But what I wanted to point out here is that a lot is being said around Pegasus. These corporations which run these softwares like Apple iOS or Android haven't come out with a statement as to how intrusive Pegasus can actually be, technically speaking. So far, we have journalists making assertions. We have journalists both domestic as well as abroad who are trying to come out with this broad-based list. We need to get to understand, first of all, that if we get this list, where was the source, the source of these names, and how much authentic is that? These are broad brushed assertions which are made, and therefore the kind of words they might have been tapped, or there is a possibility that these set of people have been tapped, because some of the people within that list that have come out, it seems pretty bizarre. What logic would they serve? I mean, look at Prahlad Singh Patel, who is the current City Union minister. His cook and his gardener have been under the tapping list, so to say. And the amount of money that is to be spent to tap into the phone of a cook would be to the tune of 1 crore rupees. You can directly pay 1 crore rupees to the cook, and the cook will come out and say anything that you want him to speak about. So it's prima facie, there are a lot of questions. There is one word of the journalist against the word of the government. Therefore, a lot is still unconnected, and I think the government, as well as civil society, as well as the judiciary, they should all come in and step in. And I agree with Saba Naqvi when she says that this is the fundamental bedrock of the social contract that we as citizens have gone into, and that contract breaks down if right to privacy breaks down. Therefore, I think the government
what should happen? What should the government do?
There are practical constraints, and Smita ji was absolutely right. I mean, what do you do with those constraints? And if Pegasus has done it, there should be an international inquiry, not just within India, but all prominent governments should come together and ensure that no such breach of privacy should happen. This is not just within the realm of the sovereign of India alone. I mean, even if India tries to do something about it, they would require international collaboration of sorts to get to the bottom of it.
So there have been one of two kinds of responses to this controversy and to this scandal. One is, as Saba said, this is a surveillance state. Two is Rajat saying too many things don't add up. But what is clear is that we need a probe. Without a probe, we're not going to have an answer to these unanswered questions. Rupesh ji, आपने जब अपना नाम पाया उस लिस्ट पर of journalists who could be targeted, पहले तो अपने बारे में हमारे दर्शकों को कुछ बताइए. हम जानते हैं कि आप पत्रकार हैं, झारखंड से हैं. अपने बारे में कुछ बताइए, किस तरह की असाइनमेंट्स आपको लगता है कि आप किन असाइनमेंट्स पे काम कर रहे थे कि आपको कोई सर्वेलेंस के अंडर प्लेस करना चाहे. और हम अनम्यूट कर दें प्लीज रुपेश को. रुपेश जी बोलिए. रुपेश जी.
जी, मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
जी बोले बोले बोले.
जी, तो आज से 1 सप्ताह पहले मुझे पता चला कि मेरा फोन सर्विलांस पे रखा गया था. मुझे द वायर के एक जर्नलिस्ट ने फोन किया और उन्होंने बताया कि 3 नंबर, उन्होंने मुझे बताया कि ये 3 नंबर क्या आपसे रिलेटेड है. तो एक नंबर वो था कि जब 2017 से लेके 2019 मेरी गिरफ्तारी तक, 4 जून को मेरी गिरफ्तारी हुई थी, उसके पहले तक वो नंबर मेरे पास था और 2 नंबर मेरे फैमिली मेंबर का था. तो मैंने कहा हाँ. तो उन्होंने फिर हमसे बातचीत की, लेकिन उस दिन मुझे कुछ पता नहीं चला कि ये कोई पेगासस स्पाईवेयर के जरिए ऐसा किया गया है. उन्होंने सिर्फ ये कंफर्मेशन लिया. तो खास करके मेरे मोबाइल को टेप करने की बात, ये बात जब मेरी गिरफ्तारी हुई थी और जब सेंट्रल आईबी ने मुझे पिक किया था, तो उसने खुद ही कहा था कि आपका फोन टेप पे था, आपका फोन टेप हो रहा था, टेप किया जा रहा था, इसीलिए आप तक हम पहुंच पाए. तो लेकिन जब परसों रात में जब पेगासस स्पाईवेयर का इस तरह खुलासा हुआ, स्कैंडल का खुलासा हुआ, तब तो मैं आश्चर्यचकित रह गया कि ये जो बड़े बड़े नाम हैं पत्रकारों के, उसमें एक मुझे क्यों घसीटा गया, क्यों लिया गया. तो जब मैंने देखा तो लगा कि क्योंकि मेरा फोन खास करके जून जुलाई 2017 से जो है इन्होंने इस पे रखा है, पेगासस को दिया है. तो 9 जून 2017 को गिरिडीह जिला में एक फेक इनकाउंटर के जरिए एक आदिवासी की हत्या हुई थी, उसकी माओइस्ट पता की हत्या हुई थी. उस पर मैंने रिपोर्ट किया था. वो रिपोर्ट द वायर में पब्लिश हुई थी और उसके बाद एक बड़ा मूवमेंट झारखंड में खड़ा हुआ था, उसको न्याय दिलाने की मांग को लेके, उसके न्यायिक जांच की मांग को लेके. और उस आंदोलन की धमक झारखंड विधानसभा में सुनाई दी. उस समय राज्यसभा में जेएमएम के एमपी थे संजीव कुमार, उन्होंने क्वेश्चन रेज किया. लोकसभा में एमपी थे शिबू सोरेन, उन्होंने क्वेश्चन रेज किया था. तो ये लगातार मूवमेंट चला था और उसके बाद से ही मेरा फोन टेप हुआ है, जो कि पेगासस के जरिए आया है बात सामने कि मेरा फोन इस रिपोर्ट के कुछ महीने बाद, 1-2 महीने बाद ये किया गया है. तो खास करके जो मैं जो ये जल जंगल जमीन की लूट है, खास करके झारखंड जो मिनरल्स से भरा हुआ प्रदेश है, और यहाँ पे जिस तरह से उस समय बीजेपी की गवर्नमेंट थी और जिस तरह से यहाँ पूंजीपतियों के साथ एमओयू हो रहे थे और उसके खिलाफ में जो भी आवाज उठ रही थी उसे माओवादी कह के जेल में बंद कर दे रहे थे। मैंने इसके खिलाफ आवाज उठाई। जो लगातार झारखंड के अंदर सीआरपीएफ के नए नए कैंप खुल रहे थे और उसके खिलाफ जब आदिवासी लोग उठाते थे उनका फर्जी इनकाउंटर
तो
में हत्या हो रही
आपको सॉरी मैं आपको इंटरप्ट कर रही हूँ, तो आपको लगता है कि इसीलिए शायद आपको निशाना बनाया गया या आपके काम में इंटरेस्ट है? अगर मैं आपसे पूछूं, एंड देन आई वांट टू गो टू स्मिता, अगर आप ब्रीफली मुझे संक्षेप में बताएं, आज आपको गुस्सा है कि डर है इस लिस्ट पर अपना नाम पाकर? रुपेश?
हाँ, नहीं, मैं सोचा स्मिता, तो ये जो बात है, डर तो बिल्कुल नहीं है, गुस्सा है, और खास करके जो मेरी निजी जिंदगी से छेड़छाड़ की गई है और जो मेरा निजी, जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने 24 अगस्त 2017 को कहा कि निजता का अधिकार लोगों का मूलभूत अधिकार है, तो उस पे ये हमला है जो संविधान की 21वीं सूची में दिया गया है। तो मुझे डर बिल्कुल नहीं है, मुझे गुस्सा है, और खास करके मेरे काम को सरकार ने नोटिस लिया, और खास करके अगर सत्ता जनविरोधी हो और अगर आप जनविरोधी नीतियों का पर्दाफाश करते हैं और सत्ता आपको टारगेट पे लेती है, तो मैं इसे एक मेडल समझता हूं। ये हमारे लिए एक मेडल है जी।
Okay, so ये हमारे लिए एक medal है. This is a medal for me, says Rupesh, a journalist who finds himself on that list. Smita, what I want to understand from you is that should this not have been a moment for the media to close ranks? I know India's media is bitterly divided, but on this, if nothing else, why do you think even on this we are seeing a familiar polarization, a familiar kind of ideological divide, especially within broadcast networks?
No, why should the media be united in everything or in even one issue? Media is never united. Why should any one issue be of equal concern to everybody across the board? Yes, I empathize with the journalist that you just spoke to, but I also wonder इनका फोन टैप करके किसी भी सरकार को क्या मिलना था? बिकॉज इनके जैसे जो पत्रकार हैं जो ग्रास रूट लेवल पर काम करते हैं, इनको टैप करके, इनको धमकी देके कुछ नहीं मिल सकता, ये अपना काम करते रहेंगे. इट्स द सिटी जर्नलिस्ट, द लटियंस जर्नलिस्ट हु हैज एक्सेस जर्नलिज्म, उनको फर्क पड़ता है. उनका फोन टैप करके अगर उनको बोला जाएगा कि तुम्हारा जो लैंड डील है भैया, तुमको वो लैंड डील नहीं मिलेगा तो तुम ये मत करो, या तुम्हारा वो जो होटल है उसका लाइसेंस बंद कर देंगे. These are the kind of journalists whose phone could get tapped and they could get compromised, because journalism is just one of the businesses they are involved in. But journalists like the person that you just spoke to, इनका फोन टैप करके कुछ नहीं मिलेगा. So I don't believe for a moment that anybody would have benefited by tapping this.
पर वो जो बसमिता, फिर वो जो लिस्ट है, then in some ways you're saying वो पूरी लिस्ट ही झूठी है क्योंकि उस लिस्ट में इनका नाम है.
I'm not saying झूठी है, but I'm nobody to give a list, a character certificate or a meritorious certificate to the list. But I have certain questions. For example, if you were tapping Karnataka politicians and they are on the list, I can't understand just before Delhi elections this tapping was done and they didn't tap Kejriwal's phone. Maharashtra was under tumult and they didn't tap Sharad Pawar's phone. The CAA agitation was at its peak and none of the CAA activists' phones were tapped. So many people. So, I would have questions. And then again, the journalist concerned whom you just said, he has written in The Wire. It seems to be only The Wire journalists who are primarily attacked. There are like scores of journalists around the country, but it seems to be just them. Even the politicians, like I said, there are so many politicians, and Prahlad Patel and Vaishnavi, who was nobody at that stage. Why him? Parameshwaran was not even there. I mean, wasn't even significant at that point of time. So, several questions I have. So that's why I would take this whole thing with a pinch of salt. I don't agree that everybody on that list. And who's done this investigation? I still want to know. It is Amnesty which has done the investigation. They're not journalists. I'm sorry. So I don't have full faith in the investigation or in the forensic.
Okay, so it seems from what my understanding that obviously there has to be a whistleblower that leaked this data out of NSO and Pegasus to Amnesty and this France-based NGO called Forbidden Stories, that in turn then provided it to these 16 organizations. But Dr. Baru, I think what Smita is arguing is that there is no pattern, that there isn't a pattern where you can join the dots, that in fact in the list of journalists, there are also journalists who are regarded, I don't want to use the word as close to government, but certainly who have very smooth access to key functionaries of the government. So the pattern is missing. It's not that all the prominent critics of the government are on the list or all the political opposition is on the list. And therefore, for Smita Prakash, the story doesn't necessarily add up. Your response, Sanjay?
See, first of all, it's irrelevant about who is being tapped. That's a secondary issue. The primary issue is the fact that they're being tapped. I mean, why X, why not Y, why Z? These are all issues that one can analyze at a later date. You know, I've been talking to various people in the last 24 hours, and all kinds of theories are there. You know, journalist X is being tapped not because the journalist is important, but because he's close to politician Y, and therefore the object of the tapping is politician Y and not journalist X. A cook is being tapped not because he's important, but because, as we have now discovered from various politicians, they don't use their own phone, they use the phone of their aides when they're making important phone calls. So, you know, why X is being tapped or Y is being tapped is not the issue. What we have in front of us is the fact that phones are being tapped. That I don't think that today can be denied given the amount of evidence that is available internationally. Phones are being tapped. The different governments are responding to that. The reality of telephones being tapped across the country, we all know it. It's not simply Lutyens journalists who are being tapped or journalists of significance. State governments across the country are known to have tapped local journalists because a lot of information is sought by those in power about what is happening around them. This is the reality. And whenever people have alleged phone tapping, there needs to be an inquiry because it is invasion of privacy.
And how do you respond? And before I come to Saba, how do you respond to the argument that without those devices, without that even technology will be an obstruction in getting to the bottom of this? We may never know who ordered this. There'll always be plausible deniability, as there is with surveillance in any government. Right? I mean, there is that dimension. Do you want to pick that up, Saba?
No, Barkha, I'd just like to pick up one point from my colleague in Jharkhand. I want to just elaborate on that a little bit. In 2017, I had occasion to travel extensively in Bastar, and I went to Jagdalpur jail, and there were 4 journalists. I wrote a large piece which was published by the Times of India edit page, Media Behind Bars in Jharkhand. The issue of Jal, Jungle, Zameen, these are fought after. So I know the terrain from which he is coming. The journalists there are working in far riskier conditions, and they don't like to be in jail. And there are big corporate interests. There are big police. It's a very, very difficult terrain. So I am talking about a story which you will find online. And I know exactly where my colleague from Jharkhand is coming from. And for us to say that only the Lutyens guys matter and these guys don't matter, these are the ones who are actually at the crux of the battles on the ground. So I would like to just take up cudgels on that point. And I entirely agree with Dr. Sanjay Baru. It doesn't matter. First, these battles on the ground are as important than some of those imaginary Hindu-Muslim silly debates we carry on with our media, right? Those are the real battles. That is why they pick up and they put journalists in jail. One by one, they've all got out. These are not guys who have access to big media like we do, And it's 4 of them. I mean, I actually met them. It was a shocking experience. I took the matter up with the then Chief Minister, Shri Raman Singh, and Times of India carried that piece. It was an affront to media freedoms. Anyway, but the point is this, so those battles are as important. So there is somebody out there who thought it worthy to put these journalists in jail on the ground. And as Sanjay Baru says, with all his years of experience, it doesn't matter.
Okay, let me take that to Rajat. Yeah, Rajat, the fact is that the government, instead of sort of just simply saying order a probe, has actually hit back at journalists who are telling the story, question their intent, question their credibility, question their motive. how does that enhance the government's position or the government's credibility by shooting the messenger quite literally? If we all agree that privacy is the bedrock. Yeah. And can I
I think
request you to
government's position.
rather just lean forward a bit. Just lean forward a bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, government's frustration is pretty justified at this point in time. I mean, when the investigation hasn't even initiated, there have been blatant accusations made on the government of the day. I mean, did we pause and look at the bigger picture? And of all organizations, it is Amnesty International, that farcical organization which is actually kicked out of this country, who has no other business other than doing and meddling into internal affairs of a country. That organization is going to dictate and accuse the government of the day? Absolutely not. And I think government is absolutely right, coming heavily down on the credibility of the stuff until, like Sanjay ji said, there are a lot of evidences. I need to know what is single piece of evidence in this whole piece of accusation which are thrown around. So right to privacy is sacrosanct. There can be no doubt about it. But look at the details. Where are the details? There is some website which is just publishing these names. But
these are some of the biggest names. There are biggest names of the media, from the Guardian to the Washington Post, the Le Monde. Even if you don't like the Wire in India, the names I have listed, surely they have decades of journalistic credibility, right? I mean, so the point is that are we going to dismiss the Post, Le Monde? Yes,
could be. I mean, you see, there is a serious, a racket of sorts which happened with this connivance between various international news agencies. We have seen that ample number of times how New York Times editorial boards gets compromised specifically on Indian issues. There are ample examples out there. I have, as an Indian speaking, I have serious doubts on any accusation without backing of any evidences, any strong evidences coming in from the Western media.
Okay,
that is my principal point. Show me one evidence, and then I'm going to back off from what I'm trying to say.
Okay. I want Dr. Baru to come in
a plain published list, and that too published by Amnesty and The Wire, which I don't agree with or trust at all.
Okay, I want to pick up the Amnesty issue with Sanjay for a moment, because the Congress hated Amnesty International as well. Right, and Amnesty, in fact, I think one of the Amnesty members had a tweet saying shut down by Congress, attempted to be shut down by Congress, attempted to be shut down by BJP. We're not going anywhere, right? So the fact of the matter is that this is not the first time that an organization like Amnesty has been viewed by suspicion by the Indian state, and that is the nature of the tension between a group like Amnesty and any state, right? That's the nature of what happens when you interrogate power. You perhaps do it from one extreme, the state reacts from another extreme. Sanjay, do you want to respond to Rajat and Smita's point that this is coming from Amnesty, and therefore how can it be taken at face value?
You see, we now live in an integrated world of communication. This is not the first time that an external agency or institution or organization has come out with data that the government has been asked to look at. I mean, you heard of Panama Papers. And when Panama Papers came out, the government of the day said, we are inquiring into it. Various Indian businessmen were named in the Panama Papers. So we are now in a globalized communication world in which data is available internationally. All of us who use mobile phones or laptops or whatever are putting out data that is accessible. And so people outside have accessed information. And as you correctly said, 17 international media organizations have had access to this information. We have gone through the Snowden papers. We have gone through Panama Papers. We've seen so many of these, episodes in the past. And governments of the day in various countries are being asked by their citizens, get into this inquiry, find out if it is true. If there are bank accounts, Swiss bank accounts, etc., get into them. And our governments have in the past inquired into this kind of information. So why is it now we are shying away?
Yeah, I think that's the fair point, that should be the appropriate response. I need to start taking last comments briefly. Rupesh ji, सबसे पहले आपसे पूछूंगी, एक सवाल उठा कि क्यों आपका नाम आपको सर्वेलेंस पर डालकर किसी भी सरकार को क्या मिलेगा? इसका जवाब आप क्या देंगे?
इसका तो एक ही जवाब है कि मेरा अगर सर्विलांस पे रखा गया मुझे, और उसका एकमात्र जवाब यही है कि सरकार जो एमओयू साइन कर रहे हैं पूंजीपतियों के साथ, जो यहाँ पे आदिवासियों के प्रोटेस्ट हो रहे हैं, जो उनके फर्जी इनकाउंटर हो रहे हैं, जो उनकी फर्जी मुकदमे में गिरफ्तारी हो रही है, ये मामला आगे ना जाए, क्योंकि इसे हम ही जैसे लोग जैसे पत्रकार हैं जो कि इसको उठाते हैं, क्योंकि लोकल मीडिया जो है वो तो इसको उठाती ही नहीं है। तो वो साफ सी बात है कि इस तरह की आवाज ना उठे, क्योंकि जो बात साफ है कि इससे तमाम लोगों के हित जुड़े हुए हैं, क्योंकि वो पूंजीपति जो खनिज पदार्थ को दोहन कर रहे हैं वो सिर्फ भारतीय नहीं है, वो विदेशी भी हैं, देशी विदेशी पूंजीपति हैं, वेदांता से लेके सारे बड़े बड़े पूंजीपति इसमें शामिल हैं। तो वो इस लूट को बरकरार रखना चाहते हैं और उस लूट के खिलाफ जो आवाज उठ रही है वो बाहर ना निकले, इसीलिए मुझे मेरे ऊपर यूएपी लगाया गया। लेकिन भले पुलिस कुछ साबित नहीं कर पाई और 6 महीना तक जेल में रहा मैं, और वो चार्जशीट फाइल नहीं कर पाई, मैं जेल से बाहर आ गया, तो यही हुआ। लेकिन उसने मेरा फोन टेप करके भी वो मुझे जेल में बरसों बरस नहीं सरा सकी, क्योंकि उस पर कुछ था नहीं। तो 6 महीना जेल में तो रखा, उन्होंने मुझे डिस्टर्ब तो किया। तो ये तो बात है, अगर मतलब ऐसा है कि मेरा फोन टेप नहीं हो सकता है तो मैं तो ये नहीं मानता हूँ, क्योंकि उसने कहा भी था, सेंट्रल आईबी ने भी कहा, उस समय भी मैंने एक किताब भी लिखी है जेल से आने के बाद जो अमेजन और फ्लिपकार्ट पे है, मैंने सवाल उठाया है कि उसने मुझे कहा था, तो फिर क्यों नहीं सरकार ने जवाब दिया?
पर
उस
आपका
समय
आपका आपका पैशन लेकिन कम नहीं हुआ, इसलिए मैं स्माइल कर रही हूँ, क्योंकि आपका पैशन कम नहीं हुआ पत्रकारिता के लिए, जो मुझे
नहीं,
समझ आया।
बिल्कुल। पत्रकारिता दरअसल मैं कोई पैसा कमाने के लिए पत्रकारिता नहीं करता हूँ। पत्रकारिता मैं इसलिए करता हूँ कि जो लोगों के संवैधानिक राइट्स हैं वो उनको मिले, जो 5वीं अनुसूची में जो बात कही गई है आदिवासियों के लिए वो उनको अधिकार मिले, पेशा एक्ट में जो कहा गया है, मेरा उनके साथ जुड़ाव है। मैं चाहता हूं कि एक अच्छा समाज बने, ये लूट बंद हो, और जो सरकार की विकास की परिभाषा है कि जंगल उजाड़ दो, पहाड़ को खोद दो, मैं उनके उस विकास की परिभाषा पे, विकास की अवधारणा पे सवाल खड़ा करता हूँ।
जी, thank you, Rupesh ji. Rajat, I want to ask you, when you said it doesn't make sense, why is the cook on this list, why is so-and-so on this list, what about the very serious sort of issues that have arisen from the people who are on this list, who are not a cook or who are not a driver, right? So, for example, a former election commissioner, who is seen to have given an adverse judgment on against the BJP during the 2019 campaign. The female staffer who made an allegation of sexual harassment against the former Chief Justice. Key opposition leaders. I mean, these are all very grave, possibly grave sort of constitutional issues that arise from possible surveillance, I use my words carefully, of these individuals. Rajat?
The answer lies in your question, Barkha. It's a possible hypothetical list so far till the evidences are not out. Anybody sitting in India conniving together with some of these, these editorial boards outside who have had dubious.
Why would anyone do it? So, why would 17 organizations?
There are multiple. Why would New York Times be so bothered about issuing such crazy advertisements for hiring people within India, and the kind of editorial policies one after the other, the kind of things that they publish about India? I mean, all this lack credibility. And young people like us, when we read, we see absolute disconnect with what's happening on the ground and what these editorial boards are trying to, a classic case of trying to colonize our minds through their editorial board sitting outside. They're trying
so what should the government do? I'm sorry, I'm rushing you along. What should the government do? How should the government respond, in your opinion?
As I said before, whosoever is the whistleblower should come out that this is that I am the whistleblower and this is the rationale. Number one. Number two, what is very important is the tech companies. Please understand, Apple has promised privacy to all of its customers. We need to hear from Apple and Amazon. Google. Does their platform even allow such kind of a surveillance? This is a blanket surveillance that you can absolutely hack into microphones and cameras and all kinds of things. Where are they? Where are the tech players who have promised privacy to its users? They haven't come out. They need to come and speak that, is it even feasible? And I think if the dots can be connected, then the government should step in and try to set up a program.
You clearly don't think we're at that point yet. Saba, I think what Rajat is saying is you need a Snowden moment. You actually need the Edward Snowden of this story for the government to order a probe, is what he's saying. What would you say?
I think this is a very, very serious matter. And Rajat is saying he doesn't like The Wire, he doesn't like Amnesty, and he may or may not like the Washington Post. That's besides the point. But surely I would appeal to all my fellow panelists, even those who are sort of saying, no, but how does it add up? How does this happen? It's serious. This is the first step. If we all don't unitedly challenge this, if we all don't speak out in one voice, this is not acceptable. Whether my colleague in Jharkhand is tapped or whether Sanjay Baru is tapped, or whether you're tapped tomorrow, Barkha. It can be anyone.
Yeah.
The IT minister, the current IT minister, was allegedly tapped. For God's sake, this is a very, very serious issue. It has passed the fundamental scrutiny which makes for a story. Media organizations, many of them do their due diligence. Many of these TV channels, those sad things where some of us have come from, some of us sit in, they do no due diligence. They just throw out rubbish day in and day out. Are you saying they are legitimate? And this scrutinized international story, which is getting governments around the world to sit up and take notice, doesn't think because you don't like the wire. And I will also make one more point. What is the reason that it has gone to the wire and not to an Indian paper right now? Think about that. What has happened to Indian mainstream media? They need government advertising. They carry columns dressed up by ministers. That is now column writing. That
Okay.
is what media has got reduced to, mainstream media.
Let
So
me
they
let me
have told, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
let me get
It's a
Smita.
fact.
Let me get Smita to react to that. Smita, you said why does the media have to be united on everything, and that's fair. But when it's about violation of the right of a journalist to do her job, and that is what happens when you're possibly placed under surveillance, because somebody can access every single source that you're talking, or even use your personal life, or to embarrass you. Anything can happen if somebody's listening in, and therefore, why isn't this a moment for media solidarity? Smita, and your last thoughts.
Before I answer that, I want to say this, that Saba, I think, deliberately misconstrued what I was trying to say. At no point did I say that Rupesh, what he was doing was less important than what Lutyens media was doing. And I never said that the Lutyens media is more important, and hence their phones should probably have been on the list. That's not what I said. And I repeatedly said that what he is doing, and the reason he got tapped, and it matters nothing that his phone got tapped, because the passion will still stay. He will continue to do the work, and those who tap phones of journalists like Rupesh know that regardless of the phone, because they're not scared of going to jail. They're not scared. They're going to continue, come back and do the same reporting. Whereas that's not what you can say about a lot of city media. So that's, I was praising, and I
Okay.
was and now I come to the point which you asked, that why should it? Because I, like Rajat, feel that I don't agree with many of the things that are coming on that list, because I don't believe that the forensics done by Amnesty is something I'm willing to put my trust on. And you may think that everybody should come together, because everybody should come to the way that Saba is thinking. No, I don't agree with that, because I don't think she agrees to what I think, and
So
I
how
don't
should
believe
the government
all media
respond?
is
So how
compromised.
should
Other than YouTube media, all media is compromised. Newspapers, television channels, everybody is compromised. I refuse to be that cynical about today's media.
Can you briefly say what you think the government should do in your opinion?
Absolutely should have an inquiry on that. I agree with you. I agree with you when I said that it will lead nowhere. I'm just going by what has happened, probably cynical, that nothing happened. You remember what happened with Radia tapes. Could anybody prove that you went and fixed cabinet ministers? Nobody could. Could anybody prove that who did the tapping and who benefited from the tapping? Nobody.
I would actually argue that the Radia tapes paved the way for us to be this casual about people's privacy being invaded. Ratan Tata went to court and nothing happened except Justice Chandrachud telling us that right to privacy is sacred. But if it is sacred, Dr. Baru, then, I mean, I have a lot to say on the Radia tapes, but unfortunately, we're at the last 30 seconds of the program. But Tata did try and fight that battle. The Supreme Court did make an observation. And to that extent, Smita has a point that are we really hopeful that we're going to get to the bottom of this? Sanjay? Yeah. Is Sanjay on mute?
Whether we get
Yeah.
whether we get to the bottom of this or not. And this is not the first time telephones are being tapped or people are being under surveillance. This will not be the last time. But that is simply not the issue. The issue is some information has been put out. And to say that it is motivated against India is utter nonsense. Sorry for using very strong words, because it's a global campaign. 17 very highly regarded publications are involved in putting this out. Everybody does their due diligence. We cannot rubbish them, and we cannot say they're anti-India and they've got some agenda. No. The fact is that various publications around the world have come together, looked at the material, put this out, and it is damning material, and it has to be investigated. Whether something comes out of it or not is secondary. Whether these individuals who have been tapped are important or not is tertiary. The fact is that some information has come out which is damning, because it shows that an organization that does surveillance only with government permission has in fact been tapping individuals in India. And it's important, in fact, for the government of India to come out and say whether it's the government that is behind it or other foreign governments are behind it.
And that's what I was going to say. And that was going to be my last question, Sanjay, that we have to close. That if indeed the government has nothing to do with this, then actually in some ways it's even graver, because that means that Israeli software is being used against Indian citizens. So the government should actually take this up with Israel.
Absolutely. And we have had history of the KGB and the CIA and various other, ISI and various, international organizations, gathering information in India. Now we have Israelis gathering information in India. It's a serious national security matter. It requires serious inquiry. It cannot be simply dismissed away by saying that,
I think we all agree. I think other than Rajat, who thinks there needs to be much more to at least have an inquiry, we at least all agree on the need for the inquiry. I think that would be a much more appropriate response from institutions of power than to actually disparage the very reporting of this story. That I think is counterproductive and completely defeats the purpose. But we'll have to leave it there. Smita, Prakash, Rajat, Sethi, Saba, Naqvi, Dr. Baru, and Rupesh, thank you so much. And to our audience, we continue to focus on this story. In a few minutes from now, the lawyer who represented the woman staffer at the Supreme Court who made allegations of sexual harassment against the then Chief Justice will be joining us. So this story continues to develop on our platform. Stay tuned, and to our panel today, goodbye. Thank you for joining us, and hope to have all of you back very soon. Thank you and bye-bye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.